Hey, Monica, did you know it's now even easier to listen to Around the Hay Bale podcast?
What? Really? How easy?
That's right. All you have to do is say, Alexa, play Round the Hay Bale podcast.
Playing Round the Hay Bale podcast on Apple Music.
Ooh, we're really fancy now.
Tune in to Round the Hay Bale every Monday at 9 a.m. Central Time.
Grab a cup of joe and let's gather round that hay bale. With your hosts, Anne from Andale Homestead, Cayce from Ormsby Farms, Monica from Bland's Promised Land Ranch. Here they are. Hey, y'all, hey.
Hey, y'all. Hey, I'm Anne with Andale Homestead.
Hey, everyone, it's Cayce over at Ormsby Farms.
And I'm Monica at Bland's Promised Land Ranch. Now, if you are listening to us on the podcast, but you want to see our beautiful faces, make sure you head on over to our YouTube channel, like, comment, subscribe, share it with all your friends, but you can see our faces right over there. And we absolutely love reading all your comments, and all the things you do when you interact with us over on YouTube really helps the algorithm to get our podcast and our faces out there on the YouTube. We really want to be out there for more like-minded people, so that people that are wanting to know, maybe people like you, will be able to hear what we have to say and what we're sharing, what we're learning as well. So don't forget to click our link tree down below. It'll take you right on over to our social media links. Click on YouTube and make sure to subscribe. Now, let's get started for today's episode. Cayce, what are we talking about?
Well, craziness. Can y'all believe it's almost Christmas? That's what's crazy. We hope everyone is having a wonderful little holiday week. But today we are talking about planning for next year, which seems a little crazy, because the year's not up yet. But planning takes time. So we're going to be talking about planning out your homestead plan for the next year. And off air, we were chatting, and I said, I'm the psycho that has like paperwork planning. Like I sit down for my garden, I sit down for my pantry, and I'm like, okay, what did we do this year? How much did it do? How did we like it? And so forth. So I think that's how we kind of talk about it. We'll start with garden. All of us are garden lovers.
Yes.
Every year, I know the size of my garden, and I know what I usually put in the rows. Now, if you finish up this episode, we do have an episode where we talked about planning out your gardens, and there's apps that our dear friend Sandi talked about on how many you can put in there, what are companion plants, so on and so forth. So that's what I do. I sit down and I'm like, okay, what did I have this year? I had 5 rows of tomatoes, 2 rows of peppers, 4 rows of zucchini squash, whatever it was. And I was able to do this, and this canning.
Mm-hmm.
Did we use all of it? Did we not? And that's how I plan out my garden. So I know that I can check to see if I have seeds.
That's right.
When I need to start those seeds, and everything's mapped out on a little plan. Now, do either one of y'all, are y'all crazy like me and do like paper sheet workshop kind of thing for your garden? Or is it kind of like April comes and it's like, yeah, we'll throw some tomatoes in there?
Oh, gosh. Well, I don't actually write it down. I mean, my husband and I do discuss it because we garden together as a team. I do, however, at this time of year, right here at Christmas time, I do try to make sure that my seeds are together, because here in North Carolina, which you're in Georgia and Monica is in Texas, we can all do this, but we have plants that we want to get started indoors to be able to have a heads up, so that by the time that March comes around, our brassicas, our collards, and our cabbage and grassy or green items that we're getting ready to, that we would like to have in the early spring, that die in the summertime. So we can have our starts going. And so when it comes to March or April, they're ready to go in the ground. And so that's kind of what we do as far as that goes. And Monica, what do you do as far as planning? Now, there's a difference in planning and actually following through. Okay, because all of us are guilty of planning and saying, do as I say, not as I do. But
Right.
what would you like to, what kind of plans have you thought about or that you're going to be trying for next year?
Okay, so I don't keep the like list, if you will, that Casey keeps, but I do have a garden journal. It's a little notebook that I've had for the past 5 years or so. And what I do is I actually make a map kind of how I want to do my garden. And I look, so this time of year, I make that garden map usually in the spring when I'm planting. So at this point in the year, I typically look and see what I did for this year. And I look over and say, okay, this worked here. These were terrible. This did great. This
Right.
didn't do so well. Maybe I want to. And so this time of year is typically when I look back at the year that I just had and the previous years to see where I want to plant things, what worked, what didn't work. I
Mhm.
also keep notes throughout the year, whether or not I'll take notes then and say, this was a especially hot year, or I used a lot more water this year than I did last year. This is when I'm kind of gathering the information from my summer and spring and fall and try to take all those notes and put them together so that
Right.
I'm ready to go in the January, February, because I have a good plan in mind. Typically, I will kind of map it out so that way it can go into effect in the January, February time period and start moving. But I really do pay attention as well to compost this time of year.
Right.
We
Good.
will clean up our pasture if we haven't done it over the summer, depending on how busy we are. We will go through and we call it a poop scoop Sunday or Saturday or whatever. We'll go through that weekend and we'll just take the boys on a Saturday afternoon and we go scoop through the pasture. We just get as much as we can out of the pasture and away from the animals. And we'll do that throughout the season. Usually we do that through the fall as much as possible too. Anytime it's a rainy season as well, we try to get that out of there because leaving that on the ground is not necessarily the best for the animals that are in the pasture. And
Right.
it's good for me to have it into my compost area because now is the time, especially when I want that compost to really heat up so that
Yeah.
I put it on my garden in January and February because I want it to be on my garden in January. I want it to be sitting there
Okay.
and working and doing its thing by January, so that it can sit for that month before I start to put things into the ground. Um,
That's great.
so yeah, I really focus on compost and kind of regrouping my garden experience for the year, to
Mhm.
see what really worked for me. Yeah.
So there is something that I did want to ask. Casey, are you one? There are so many others out there. Worth and I have, you and I are both weed barrier people.
Mhm.
But
Proud and loud.
yes, but our weed barrier has little holes in it where the plants were and so forth. Do you do anything as far as removing that weed barrier during the winter and treating your soil, covering your soil? Because the saying is, Mother Nature, our soils don't like to be uncovered. They like to have either a cover crop or some sort of physical cover. Do you do that?
I do pull up the ground cover around November, December, because that's when I'm usually pulling out the garden.
Hmm.
I will leave the garden in there like a month after everything has died. Because again, all of our dear friend Sandi said, leave it in there because the dead plant is going to release all the nutrients that it got over the garden season back into that soil.
Right.
And then come November, I'll pull everything. I'll pull up the garden ground cover. And I'll tell you also, that's when I look to see if it is time for new ground cover.
Yes. Hmm.
Because they really only last about 3 years, stand good, and some people can get 5 out of it. I have noticed that mine is going on 3 years and hers is looking a little shabby. So
Yeah.
when I pull it up this year, it will be time to use it for something else. I'm not going to necessarily throw it away, but then I
Right.
like to put like a tarp or black
That was
plastic
the question, a tart. Mhm.
back over to keep everything warm in there. Because I don't necessarily do what Monica was talking about until February, Marchish with my chicken goodness, I'll say. I like to keep, and you would have heard on a previous episode when we talked with one of our friends from about keeping your poultry warm over the cold months.
Mhm.
I like to keep the poop and the wood chips stacked up in there until February-ish when it starts warming up. And then I'll do a spring cleaning and I'll take all of that wood chips and poop and put it on top of the garden and cover it so all the stuff can kind of soak in and get all nasty and gross and good for your ground.
Mhm.
I do that then, but yes, we are ground covers. I do pull it up. I do cover it back up. I have left it bare one time, and you're right. It does not. The ground don't like that to be bare and nothing on top of it.
What's it called where you put something on top of it to kill everything underneath of it? Like people, a lot of times people will put like solarization. Is it called solarization?
Polarizing.
Solarizing. Okay, so here's a tip for that. If you want to solarize your space, is that what it is? Solarize?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I don't know. I always just call it ground cover.
Yeah. So if you want to solarize it, meaning you want to like kind of solarize it and heat it up and kill everything kind of underneath so that when you lift it off, you can plan on it. Cause I think that's a lot of people do too, especially in Texas because it's so hot. People at the end of the season, especially now, well, we're in December now on this podcast, but especially at the end of the year, people, especially in the warmer states like us, if they are pulling their pools down, older pools that they're getting ready to get rid of, things like that, get those pool liners. They're just trashing it anyway. Like, come pick it up. You can have it if you want.
Yeah.
Get those pools that are damaged, grab them and use them for your solarization. We have used them for years. We have been through a few pools because in Texas, sometimes pools like to get picked up and thrown like trampolines. They don't have enough water in them. And so we have several, like, so this year my pool is done. I have some holes in it. I can see it's done. So I'm going to actually cut along the edges and we're going to go ahead and make a giant strip, take the whole bottom, and we're going to use our pool, that plastic, for solarizing our garden.
Wonderful.
Don't come at me about all the different chemicals that are going to leach into my garden. Stop. Just stop right now. Don't come at me. I don't care. This is going to be a way that I'm going to do it for free. And you can find people throwing their trash out. So one man's trash is another man's treasure in this case.
And it works wonderfully. I mean, I have videos on my channel about solarizing.
That's what you want to do. Solarizing.
Literally, if you want to extend the area that you're going to be tilling in the new year, you lay down in the months now, December, January, February, lay down something that cannot, like, the ground cover is still breathable. So you don't want something like that. You want something hard plastic, water can't go through, nothing. And you want to put it down with your staples because it will, you won't get any water, moisture to your grass and the weeds, everything will die. And then, but all of that can be tilled back into your soil. Then you have a bigger garden. So yes, solarizing is a great way to plan for next year's garden because you may say, I need a bigger garden. Or you may say, like me, I really dislike mowing around my area because the grass grows this way on top of all the stuff. And so I need to polarize a path so I'm not mowing over the ground cover and cutting it up and using naughty language.
We do. We use it as a pathway. Yeah, we have a pathway on the edging of our garden because it's like a big, huge area where we just need to walk. And so we actually put this big strip of pool lining. It was like the round part. We just lay it all out. We roll it out and we just walk on that all season. And then every now and then we'll lift it up and we'll drag it down to the edge. And we keep like this much of a path. I mean, I don't know, several feet. I'm bad with that. But however wide of a, area that Eric made, and that's the edging because otherwise grass will grow. And I'm not putting chemicals in my garden if I can help it. So it keeps it fresh.
Because our fence line, I fence off the land of plenty to keep the goose ducklings and the goslings out from eating all of my plants that I've grown in the house all winter. But what a wonderful idea to be able to have that because we do replace that fence. It's just a cheap netting that we put up. So,
And did you know, I just learned this from some of my hunter buddies, speaking of fencing that you have to replace, is if you do a double one within like 5 inches apart, that deters deer from jumping over into your garden because they don't have depth perspection. They see two fences and they're like, I don't know if I can clear it. Don't know if I can clear it. So they won't. And they will stay out of your garden. I learned that this year when I tell you, because if you follow me at Ormsby Farms, you know that I had the worst luck this year with cucumbers and green beans. They were eaten 4 times until I truly gave up even though
Oh,
3
no.
of my cucumber plants did come back. So I was able to make pickles, but they tore up those 2 plants. They didn't touch the tomatoes. They didn't
Wow.
touch the peppers. They didn't touch the squash. They wanted the green bean plants and the cucumber plants.
Wow.
Okay.
4 times.
Okay. So
but
you can on your fence for the
yeah,
double 5
pl-
inches apart. That's awesome.
yeah, plan your fence that way. Plan your garden. Like
Mhm.
this is the time now to, while it's cold and you're cozied up inside with crock pot meals or soups, just sit down and jot. What did you learn from last year in your
Right.
garden? What could you do a little bit differently? Because listen, nobody's perfect, and
Mhm.
your garden season is never going to be perfect. There's always something that can be, touched up just a little bit.
Absolutely.
And I use my pantry as a guide for that too. We talked about this on another episode. When you finish this episode, go listen to that one, to where I plan out what I can by what I put in my garden. And
Right.
this time is when I'm actually looking at my pantry. Now, we still got 2 months to go on pantry stuff, but I'm like, what is really popular in my pantry right now? And I bet you anything right now, it's going to be the nacho cheese that Monica peer pressured me into canning. But also to look and see how fast we've gone through our canned meats, because that's another planning for the next year. If you're raising your own meat, you got to have a boy and a girl together that's going to produce them babies, and that takes planning. And
That's
that
right.
sitting down and saying, hey, okay, we did, like for us, we did 32 meat chickens this year.
Mhm.
How many of those meat chickens have we sold or have we eaten? Was it enough? Do we need a little bit more? I can tell you right now, and most of y'all know, we pre-record our episodes, so it really is a couple months earlier. And we're already almost out of chicken because we've completely sold out of our turkey and chicken.
Mhm.
So I
Yes.
know for next year, instead of 32, probably 64 or 60. I'll
Oh,
keep it
goodness.
with you. But doing it, 2 different times, because I
Yep.
know me and Monica have spoken off of the podcast that while 30 seemed super manageable, and it was very manageable.
Yep.
60 seems a little more daunting, but for the amount of time that chickens, now pigs, cows, completely different. We're just talking poultry right now.
Yeah.
Is max, because I'm doing American breasts, 16 weeks. How many 16 weeks can I do out of a year and be able to have 21 days for their eggs to incubate,
There
get
you
out
go.
of the 16 weeks? And that's another planning out, is saying, okay, I can do it at this time in April, and I can do it this time in October for processing or whatever it is. So that's
Right.
a good way, because of your pantry, to sit down and say, okay, what type of meats did we go through this year? And what can we do differently or better, or however you want to put it, for the following year? Do you
Yeah.
do something like that, Monica?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just looking at it. If there's 52 weeks in a year, Cayce, you're looking at about 19 to 20 weeks for a round from egg to fully round. So you could probably do 2.5 batches, depending on when you do it. So I would say spread it out. Spring, fall, whatever you're doing. But we do that here. But it's one of those things that we sit down this time of year as well, and not only look and see what we've acquired. We go through our fencing, we go through our animal care items, things like that. But we also go through our animals and say, okay, what have they produced this year? Is
Right.
it time for me to move on some of these animals, right? I mean, Miss Ann, you've got 5 girls or 4. How many girls do you have right now, poultry wise?
Four now.
So you have 4 hens. And the thing is that this is the time of year where their laying is going to slow down a little bit. So it's a good time for you to take stock of, how much did they lay for me this year? How do they do this year? How old are our animals? Because remember, your animals are only going to produce for you for so long. As a matter of fact, I just gave a speech on this. I just gave a talk on this last weekend at one of these Homestead conferences I went to. And it was about how to save money on your homestead, because we're always looking to spend so much money. We always spend so much. And some ways to save money is really to take an assessment of what you have on your property and how you can cut back on those animals. And because the thing is we're keeping older animals and we're paying for them to live their lives, beautiful lives that we've given them. They're not doing anything for us sometimes. And so this is the time of year where I need to assess, okay, is it time for me to retire my main breeding boar and sow. And yeah, for us, this is one of the things we've done. We are now retiring our main boy and our main girl when it comes to our breeding pair of pigs. So they're going to be retired this season. This will be their last season together. She should be putting babies on the ground soon. And the minute she puts babies on the ground, her boyfriend, he's gone. To go because we don't want to take a chance of getting pregnant again. So he's going to go at this time of year. It's cold. We can process them here on the homestead when it's cooler, so we don't have to send them anywhere. But these are things we're thinking about for next year because I don't want to feed old animals that aren't producing for me going into the spring because now is the time where I'm putting out more for hay. And because I'm feeding my cattle through the winter, now I can look and say, okay, who is producing for us? Who has given us babies this year? Who is going to give us a more production for next year? And if she hasn't done X, Y, and Z, then I need to retire her out. And so when that comes to poultry, it comes to bovine, it comes to my, my pigs, it comes to my rabbits. We redid the whole rabbitry last year. And it was right about this time where we said, these are great animals. They've been great for us, but it's time to revamp our meat. And we know it takes so long for them to provide from start to finish. Let's do it now when it's a little bit slower of a season.
Right.
And we know that spring is coming. So if you're planning now in the winter for spring, that's what you've got to look ahead for. So we do that all the time with our animals, but you got to know the life cycle of your animal. You got to know how long it takes for them to produce. I mean, you're looking at
especially for you, Miss Ann, with the chickens. I mean, at some point, one thing with chickens is they are born with all the eggs they will lay in their lifetime. And it doesn't, you're not going to get the magic of Jesus to produce anymore. It's just what they come with. And correct me if I'm wrong, Monica, but it's around 3-ish when that egg laying starts to slow.
Yeah, they start to decline.
And so you have to think, okay, I may need to get some more babies or incubate some babies because it's 21 days to incubate and then it's 22 weeks before they're starting to actually lay because you don't want to run out of eggs. That's the one thing. When you're a homesteader and you raise, and I'm speaking out of experience, and you are in the middle of baking season and your hens are freeloaders and, I have 16 girls and I'm getting 2 eggs a day. And you open your fridge door, you don't have any eggs for baking. So you really want to plan out because it'd be terrible for the eggs that your older girls to be like, all right, Miss Andell, we appreciate you, but we are done laying.
We're done.
We meet Jesus.
Well, I think it's important to remember, and this is something I said the other day to Eric, and he was like, "Oh, that's really good." We are humans that we take care of these animals. These animals we don't owe them a retirement fund. Okay. That means we are not paying for them in their retirement. If they're on our payroll now, we pay them, they give us things, they work for us. And then when it's time for retirement, we are not obligated. They do not have a 401k. They have not been saving up.
They may have to look into the state.
They have not had this Roth IRA. They have not rolled their assessments into something bigger. No, ma'am. We love you. We are thankful for you. You have been a gift to us. Now it's time to finish it off.
Time to go.
Done. Yeah. And so, this is the best time for you to look. How old are my girls? How old are my laying hens? Is it time for me to start thinking about when I want to replace them? If I replace them in the winter, I have to worry about heat sources. I have to worry about caring for them when they're babies now. But if I replace them now, then I'll have eggs for the spring.
Right.
Or do I replace them in the spring and summer? I don't have to worry about a lot of extra heat sources, but then they're not laying until the winter, right? So now's the time to plan.
That is something that you really do have to plan for.
Absolutely.
As far as, being able to figure out their incubation time.
Yeah.
How long you're going to have when you want them to start laying. Because ultimately what we would like for them to do is come in the fall or be born in the fall, grow in our incubators and so forth through the winter. And then come spring, you've got a bunch of laying hens.
Right.
Exactly. Laying at the same time.
Yeah.
I am curious as to what you do, Monica. In North Carolina has a little bit of, we have seasons. We do have fall, winter, spring, and summer. But how about you? In Texas, you're either really hot or really cold. And so there's seasons that you have to plan for as far as the next year of when you're going to do your breeding so that you can have babies on the ground at
Yeah.
a certain kind of weather,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, we try to control that. We try to make sure that our sow and boar together for the pigs. We try to make sure that our bull pretty much stays with his ladies all year round. But we do remove them at certain times just because the grass is better different times. We like to give our pasture a break, but we try to have babies hit the ground in spring and summer. So we do like to try to get them pregnant kind of right back to back. We let them go with their body's pace. We really watch the cow herself. Heifers, usually we like to have them on the property. So when my heifers are going into the first calving season for them, we like to have them come into a more mild weather. So we try to control when they're with the bull, but ideally we'd like calves born between spring and like December 1st, because having cattle put on the ground in the really cold, we've had it happen many times, but it gets a little more daunting for us. And I get a little more worried, but yeah, you've really got to plan it out. And the same with the chickens and the turkeys, they're laying eggs particular to their season, right? Turkeys are going to start dropping eggs. Oddly enough, in Texas last year, I started having turkey eggs in January. And I was like,
lucky.
I'm like, I'm not interested in eggs right now because they're going to freeze. But I was snatching them bad boys up and incubating them. And I was getting babies in the spring, like early spring. I had like little poults running around, like little turkey poults, which was great because that meant that they would be ready for Thanksgiving. Like God was giving Thanksgiving dinner in January. But so that was good, but it was early for us. So I'm not sure if it was just the season, the climate that year, but so whenever your animals start being ready to produce, you have to really watch for that. So yeah, we definitely plan for that. We want to have them done certain seasons, but look, if I'm getting chickens right now and getting little baby chicks or baby ducks or whatever it is, I'm going to take advantage of that. I'm going to hatch out what I can and then raise them in a climate controlled area.
Yes.
It's more work for me, but if that means that going into the spring, like April, when it's better weather here and the temperatures are very mild, and it means they're going to start laying eggs right then, I'm all about it.
There you go.
Because that means I've got the whole really good season.
So yes, that's awesome. Now, Cayce, as far as planning next year's homestead and your canning department, what have you found that you might do a little differently next year? Here we are at the end of December, and you're planning on what you have consumed over the year. I found that we don't need to plant any more collard greens because I have about 3 shelves and under beds of canned collard greens. Apparently, we don't eat them fast enough. But is there something that you would be able to raise your turkeys, your chickens, things like that you can, or your vegetables? What is something that you learn that you go through pretty quickly?
I say it a lot on the videos and on the podcast. We're a Mexican family, okay? Mexican food. We're not an actual Mexican family. We're Mexican food. So salsa seems to always run out.
Gotcha.
Listen, I could can 4 billion jars of salsa and we would probably still run out of salsa.
We ran out of salsa this year too. Yeah.
Because it's good for breakfast.
Yep.
It's good for a little munchy for lunch. And then, of
Mhm.
course, if you have fajitas for dinner, it's wrong if you don't put out a jar of chips and salsa. It's my opinion, it's wrong. So I go into it knowing that, okay, we really do enjoy Mexican food. I need to can some black beans. I already know that. Salsa. Okay. So I go through what I need. And because of Monica's peer pressuring, I learned about recanning nacho cheese sauce. And we've already gone through a bunch of it. I mean, it's probably awful for you, but I mean, listen, it's so good. But the same thing, I have my little sectioned out for our pets as well. Not necessarily our chickens and turkeys, but the dogs that live on the homestead. I
Mhm.
can their food, while I can't
Okay.
the wet ingredients that go on their food. So I'm like, okay, I thought it was going to be a pint for a week. Let's just say that. But I noticed it's really a quart for a week. So I
Okay.
have more of this, this, and this going into next year because I don't really want to buy that wet food at the store. And there's so much chemicals that makes it shelf stable and blah, blah, blah,
Right.
blah, blah. So, and I have a list. Again, I'm real bougie and I have a list that is my canning list that hangs in my canning room. And at the beginning of October, I go through my canning room and I say, okay, diced tomato quarts. I have 40 and I write it all the way down. And
Okay.
then come December, I should be halfway through those because I
Okay.
think canning stuff from October until Marchish, early April. Because by April, I have my early spring stuff that's coming out of the garden and we're fresh eating. Uh,
Okay. Yeah.
or freezer eating.
Mhm.
So if I'm not halfway through that at the end of December, which is where we are right now when this podcast comes out, I know that either we didn't care for it or I forgot that we had it in there.
Right.
So I plan to have it half done in December. By February, I should be close to an empty pantry shelf. Like it should be knocking on heaven's door of
Ready to
being
roll
empty,
again.
ready to roll and keep it going. So that's how I keep my pantry under control. What about you, Miss Ann? Do you kind of like notice things during canning season? You're like,
Well, I
okay,
do. Yeah, I try very hard to have 6 to 8 months, even a year's worth of what we use. We probably have spaghetti incredibly often. We have tacos very often. We have chili and soups and things. So we have a plethora of canned stewed tomatoes. I mean, I just because you can use them in everything and tomato juice and tomato sauce. And I've learned that you can dehydrate the tomato peels to make your own tomato paste. So that's been very good. And we do that. And like I said, I just reorganized my pantry. Y'all would be really proud of me. And I found some sliced apples with apple pie filling and homemade apple sauce that had been
oh
in
yeah.
stuff. And I'm like, oh yay, we get to use that now. So that's what I do. How about you, Monica? How far ahead? Because I try not to get more than a couple of years ahead.
I honestly, I couldn't do that. Like, I'm amazed you guys can go that far. 'Cause, like, if I'm trying to acquire that much for the amount of people that I'm feeding, like, there's just no way. Like, it would. But it's funny because when you were talking about how you eat like spaghetti and chili and tacos and stuff like that, and I'm like, yeah, and I'm going along with you, and you're like, so that means I have lots of stewed tomatoes, and I'm like, oh, I actually don't have just the tomatoes. I have the chili and the spaghetti sauce.
Oh, that's
Taco meat.
awesome,
Like, I
though.
don't have like, I was so proud of myself last week when I like cracked into one of the only 4 jars of stewed tomato, like actual canned tomatoes that I had in there. I cracked open to one of the 4 that I had, and I was like, yeah, in this chili, I have my own tomatoes. You're welcome. And the kids were like, whoop, whoop, because typically my tomatoes were all just meant, they all went right to like tomato sauce or tomato, or salsa right away. Like, I never was able to can enough to keep up. We would use it right away. And
Right.
so
Okay.
in my pantry, I have canned foods like meals. So
Yeah.
on that pantry shelf back there, you're going to see canned meat. It's going to be cans of beef stew. It's going to be cans of chili, cans of spaghetti sauce already prepared, cans of taco meat, or shredded chicken meat. Like, that's the food that I have prepared. I don't have enough for years, but I know that if I can't grocery shop next week because I
Right.
don't have the money in my bank account, I can grocery shop out of that. So
Right.
that's helpful, at least, and I could do that for a couple weeks. And for instance, my son was like, hey, we're thinking about coming over on, Saturdays maybe to save money on our budget. I'm like, come on, bring it. That's fine. Because I know I have those jars. So I don't really, because of the size of the family I can't go ahead as much as maybe you guys can, but I do keep water, and I have water purifiers and ways to do that in a
Right.
large quantity. And I have lots of shelf stable food. It's just kind of a menagerie of things as much as, but now that I do have the capability of canning smaller quantities in my electric pressure canner, I do have things that I pull in a little bit easier. So that's how I was able to get those tomatoes, because I was able to do 1 quart jar at a time.
Right.
And I didn't
I'm
have
a little jealous of all those ready-made meals. Thank you very much.
Well,
Just
I'll
put
tell
your
you.
leftovers in a jar, Miss Ann. Make a
I
big
know.
batch of chili and put an extra in there. You're good to go.
Yeah, we should peer pressure her into doing that.
Start
Make food
leftovers.
just to can. I sometimes do that, but I
Yeah.
wanted to kind of reiterate right before we close out this this interview, this podcast. Both of y'all said it, and I'm the same way in my head. That when we plan our pantries, we're not planning for 10 years in the future. We're really planning for a year, 2 years max. And when you're planning for your homestead, that's what's so good about having your time to stop and prepare for the next year. Do you have enough seeds? Do you have enough boys and girls that will produce more meat that you can then can? Seeds
Right.
make the veggies, boy and girl make the meat, which is what you can.
Yeah.
Can
Yes.
some water, then you can always have that steady flow of something in your pantry that you were able to eat regularly. But it all takes planning. And we are so grateful that you came and tuned into this episode and did a little planning with us. What are y'all planning for your next year homestead? Leave it in the comments. We'd love to read it. Y'all make sure that you also join us Friday for Hey Y'all Hey. We're going to be talking a little bit more about preparing. It will actually be closer to the time. Actually, I think we need to look, because I don't think we are pre-recorded actually Friday. So we'll see you next Friday live after the very Merry Christmas and the Happy New Year's, and talk about what we have started planning for our next homestead year. So y'all, until then, make sure you are liking and subscribing and sharing it with like-minded people, because we're doing a giveaway when we hit 500 subscribers. So y'all, we hope you have a very, very Merry Christmas, a happy holidays, and we will see you on the next episode of Round the Hay Bale. Bye y'all, bye.